Good evening. Good evening, friends. Good evening, and welcome to Beyond the Pain live video. Wonderful. It's great to be back here together again after being away for a while. Yes, it's back at home. Thank God it's a brand new month. And I just want to start this evening off just by being thankful for the first 7 months of 2023. I am grateful to God for His faithfulness in our lives. He has kept us, He has brought us this far. It is indeed by the mercies of God that we have not been consumed. Oh, that men will praise the Lord for His goodness and for His wonderful works to us, the children of men. I mean, I have been away from home for almost 7 weeks, traveling in Nigeria for work and the foundation, the Feet of Grace Foundation work, and also to see my family and friends at home. It was a very busy trip, I have to say, very busy one. But in it all, I can testify of the faithfulness of God. He came through for me and my family in so many ways that I don't even have enough words to appreciate. So I just want to spend this first few minutes just to give thanks to God. For as many of you who have been following me, I'm sure you have read some of my writings. Yesterday, um, on the 30th of July, Sunday Thanksgiving, was International Friendship Day, and it was the last Sunday of July. And for me, it was a great opportunity to reflect on the gift of men, the blessings that I have received through men, the many different friends who have been conduits of God's blessings to me, and just thinking about the almost 7 weeks, 6+ weeks that I spent in Nigeria, and thinking about how people came out to be of help, and who many people who were conduits of God's blessings to me, it really was very heart searching. And yesterday, 31st of July, I just wanted to take time to appreciate every single person, man, women, young and old, who helped me during my trip in Nigeria, who supported me, who were present with me, who ran errands for me, who accommodated me, the hospitality, the gift. It was just a joy to know that we have friends who stick closer than our brother. I mean, friends who have been through the thick and the thin with us. And I really appreciate the help that I received from the gift of men. And I'm so grateful to God for all our friends, back in Lagos, in Ibadan, in Abuja, who went out on a limb, to be there, to be present, to support, and to make the journey comfortable for me, especially as a person with disability. I will always be grateful for you, and I ask the Lord to bless every single one of them. So I just wanted to start off today on that note. Thank you so much, my sister. Because today is 1st of August. For those of you who are listening to me or watching me from Switzerland, happy National Day. August 1st is a national day in Switzerland, and I am dual citizen. I'm proudly Nigerian. I'm proudly Swiss. And so I celebrate my roots, and I celebrate the country that has accepted me and taken care of me and made it possible for me to have the medical care that has kept me alive in the land of the living, that's kept me in the land of the living till today. The medical services that God made available to us through this country, I can't even begin to talk about that now. But we're going to get to talk to it as we begin the theme for this month. This month, we're going to be talking about lessons from grace in the storms. Lessons from grace in the storms. And, when I was thinking about the topic for August, our topic for consideration on Beyond the Pain, I was just wondering, you know, what would God have me share? What experience or what would be the theme for this month? And I was, speaking in different locations, and I thought that, almost everybody that I know should have seen Grace in the Storms or have a copy of Grace in the Storms. And this is the first book that I wrote of my own personal story and experience of dealing with life adversity. And I realized that there were still so many people who have not even seen the book before. And there was such a ask from it. And then I started hearing stories also of those who have read it and the impact it had on them. And I thought that, yes, this month that is meant to be a breather month, a month that I just want to take things easy. The 7 months of this year has been extremely hectic and busy. And my desire is to slow down a bit in this month. And I thought that would be a good way to slow down a bit, right? Just talk about the lessons that we've gleaned from Grace in the Storms. But as I pondered on that, how to approach it, I came across a quote that really nailed it for me. The reason why we must tell our stories matter. And that quote says, one day you will tell your story of how you have overcome what you are going through now, and it will become a part of somebody's survival guide. Let me say that again. One day you will tell the story of how you overcome what you are going through now, and it will become someone's survival guide. And I found that really profound, because the truth of the matter is that that is exactly what I desire that Grace in the Storms would be, become a part of somebody's survival guide, because I had the opportunity to share the story of what I overcame. It was in the process of what I was going through. I was wondering. One of the things that really helped me when I was going through the storms of my life was that inspiration that God gave me, that nudging that God gave me to start journaling. Then I didn't even know the power of journaling. I didn't know about the power of telling your story. I didn't know about the power of writing our experiences or what God was going to do with it. All I knew was that it helped me every moment when I was going through the thick and the thin to write what I was experiencing, and the grace of God that was helping me through that journey. And part of it was also the fact that I wanted to document my experiences living with chronic diseases and how God was helping me through every stage of it. And that was how I started writing my story. And I'm going to come to details about that, because there were also confirmation that I received about writing the story that helped me to keep at it. What I was just doing then was I captioned it "Empowered for Victory." At first, I had no name for it, and then I had it. I think after about 5 years of writing, I captioned it "Empowered for Victory," and basically, it was the story of how God was inspiring me for the victory that I was longing for and anticipating, that seemed so far out of my reach in that season of my life. But you see, that's when I read that quote, that we will tell the story of how we overcome or the adversities and the challenges of our lives, and that it will become a part of the tool, the toolbox for survival for somebody else. It confirmed to me my belief. One of the things that I say and that has helped me through the thick and the thin is that the story, the pain that we do not transform, will become a waste. Our pain will be in vain if it does not serve as a gain for others. I can't even remember how long that saying has been with me or what spurred it, what spurred it. I know I was inspired by something that I read that made me to write out that quote. Your pain will be in vain if it does not serve as a gain for others. But you see, the only way our pain can be transformed also is linked, the way our pain is transformed is linked with sharing our stories. Now, let me tell you um, an experience that happened while I was traveling. I was invited to speak at an event while I was traveling, and I was asked to share my story and how we can transform our pain to gain. And after I finished speaking, people were asked to comment, and one man in the audience requested to speak, and he said there and then that he was happy to finally meet the person who wrote this book, Grace in the Storm, that he has a copy. And he told me, he said to all of us there how he got a copy. Apparently, he had gone through severe life challenges. He was literally at the edge of suicide. He had lost a lot of things. I mean, things had, trouble besetted him. I mean, besieged him on all sides. Troubles besieged him on all sides. Friends betrayed him. Business went south. And he was at that age of, beginning to say that he had nothing to live for, that his life had no meaning anymore, that there was no possibility, no hope of a turnaround for him. So the man was already, ideating, he was having suicidal thoughts, and he shared with a mutual friend, somebody who is a very close friend of mine. And so this very close friend of ours asked him that, just hold on, let me give you one book. If you don't do anything else before you take a decision, just read this book. And he gave him a copy of my book. And the man said he started reading it that night because he respected the person who gave it to him. And he could not sleep. And he confessed that till today he has never been able to finish reading the book. But one thing happened to him in the course of reading that book. It changed his perspective of the problems that he was going through. It became clear to him that he was not alone in this world facing challenging situations, that people are also going through challenging things. And if somebody had gone through all that was written in my book and could write that book, he it gave him a sense of connection. And that was the beginning of the turnaround for him. He actually um, he stopped reading the book because he couldn't go on with it, and then he shared it with his wife because his wife had to ask him, "Why are you breathing so heavily?" He was just sighing. He was just sighing. As he was reading the book, even in the middle of the night. So for me, it was such heartwarming to hear that story on one part. And for the fact, first, because I wrote that book as an obedience to God's, as an act of obedience to God's instructions, that I must write that book to inspire hope for others, share my story, the story of His grace that kept me through the storms of life, to inspire hope for others. But to now hear how God has been using this story to touch other people's life, to fulfill the promise of what He said the book would do, inspire hope for others, and listening to someone's story of his experience of the story that I shared, it was, all I could do was to give praise and thanks and adoration to God. You see, my friends, as I will share with you what informed Feet of Grace in the Storms and how I got to write a story. We look at some of the things that I shared there, and the lessons that's come out of it. And what is more important for me is to let this also inspire you, to let you know that your story matters. Your story matters. I don't know what your story has been, but I can tell you, no matter what the story of adversity, of challenges, of troubles on all sides, of fiery ordeals that you may have faced in life, that you may have endured or may still even be enduring in this moment, your story matters. First and foremost, I want you to know that our stories are powerful. Stories are powerful. 70%, the studies have shown that 70% of what we learn are through stories. We learn through stories. And it does make sense because our brains are wired for narrative. We all like stories. If you want to engage your audience, you start with a story. Everyone who is a public speaker knows the way you captivate your audience with a story is more impactful than if you just come out and just go straight to the point, because stories draws us in. Stories attracts us, and more times than none, we can connect with human stories. We can connect with personal stories, even when our own experiences may not be exactly the same. When we hear people share stories, there is a connection that takes place, and it helps us to connect. Stories engage the hearts. When we bring a human angle, our stories bring a human angle that touches the heart. As a trauma transformational coach, one of the things that I have learned to do is to let the stories that I'm listening to touch my heart. Narratives tell us something. You can, experience what somebody has gone through, going through their narrative. Their narrative gives you an insight into the inner world of the person that is telling the story. Thank you very much. It gives you an insight into the inner world of the person that is telling you stories. It tells about their emotions. It shares about their perspectives to life. It shares about their values. Just by listening to someone's story, you can learn so much about them, about their ethos, their values, their perception. Stories are powerful. They engage our attention, they engage our heart, and more often than not, stories demand that we pay attention so that we don't miss the details. Every public speaker knows how to use that power of stories telling to engage attention, because people want to hear details that they can relate to. Now, no matter how many of us that are on the surface of the earth, our stories are unique. Each person's story is unique. Your story is unique, my story is unique, and it is your own story. It is your story of your personal experiences. It is the story of the lessons we learned in our journey of life. And when we share, we tell those stories, we actually expand other people's understanding. You expand other people's understanding when you tell your story. You broaden other people's perspective, by the way you tell your story. This is the power of storytelling. And I will, throughout this month, continue to encourage you and let you know that your story is powerful, your story matters, and your story will only remain yours. It will not have impact until it is told. The truth is, no one can tell your story better than you. You see, Chimamanda, one of the Nigerian writers, Chimamanda, she said that when you let other people tell your story, they tell a single story, right? They tell it from the way they want the world to know you. And that's why no one should tell your story for you. No one should tell your story. And no, because nobody can tell your personal experience any better than you. Your story is unique with you because no one has your unique voice. When I was writing Grace in the Storms, I mean, I did a lot of research, a lot of reading, other people's story because it's a personal story. It is my life story that I was bringing out there to the world. And as I read, I learned a lot of things from other people's story, other people's, and the way they shared their story. But the truth of the matter is that I had my own unique voice. If somebody else is going to tell the story of what I endured for 20 years plus and the grace of God that has kept me through it, they can never tell it in the way that I will tell my story because I have my unique voice. I have my unique thought patterns. Same with you. Your story is unique to you. Your story of your experiences, your dreams, your hopes, your fears, and all they all interweave together is your unique fingerprint. It's as unique as your fingerprint. There are no two of us. Even if we go through the same experience, we'll have the same outcome, the same story, because other things interweave with our stories to make it as unique as your fingerprint. And that is why your story of all our individual experiences, of all the things that defines us, our individual story is our unique, it's a unique asset. Your story is a unique asset. It's an asset that no one else can contend with. No one can contend, nobody can contend with your unique and personal story. You can put 10 Irenes together in the world. Identify 10 people called Irene Titilola Hulumese. I am very sure that you will not find another Irene Titilola Olumese who is a lung transplant survivor, a Nigerian, a Black woman, and who is a bilateral amputee. All right? I am 100% very sure. And so, my story is a unique asset to me, and it is a valuable asset. Your story is a valuable asset. It is something that you should cherish. It is something that you should value, and it is something that you should share to help others, to expand the knowledge of others, to deepen the understanding of others. You will never know the difference your story will make for somebody and how it will eventually impact their lives in the long run and help them in their own journey. Telling your stories with with all its challenges, with the mystics, the good times, the bad times, the failures, the pain, the setbacks, mixed with its joys, the successes and victories, it says something about you. It says something about being human. And that's why, even when people may not have had our own kind of challenges or go through the same traumatic experiences that we have gone through. Because of this mix of all these different pieces of our story, it makes us human. It makes us relatable. Like I shared earlier about the man that spoke after, at the event that I was, he he didn't go through the health challenges that I went through. He didn't have a lung transplant. He is not a bilateral amputee. Yet in my story, he found stuff that he could relate with, going through adversity, dealing with challenges, being at a place when it seems as if everything you worked hard for, you've lost it. And then he could see that in the midst of all of that, there was still a hope about a future that is possible. And that was what inspired him and brought him back from the edge of suicidal thoughts. My dear friends, your story will inspire others to take the first path to telling their own story. Probably the people would never have heard about how that man, what he went through, and how he overcame that adversity, and how he was inspired to hold on to hope if he had not listened to me sharing the story again. It gave him an opportunity to come out and share his own experience. And that, of course, will inspire another person and inspire the next person. It becomes a rippling effect when we share our story, laced, infused with the grace of God, because there are ways we can share stories, right? I will come to that later, but I'm talking about sharing our stories of triumph, sharing our stories of how we overcame the adversity, sharing the story of how God sustained us with His grace, sharing the story of even the times when we felt like giving up, and yet we are back up again. All of these elements of our stories becomes a tool for inspiring others, inspiring hope for others, and encouraging people to know that there is life beyond our painful experiences. No matter how tragic our stories may have been, there is a possibility, there is a future that is possible, a future that is positive beyond the story, beyond what happened to us. Of all the things that you and I can do to make this world a better place, of all the things that we can contribute to make a difference in our space, in our sphere of influence, I think one of the most valuable ones is sharing our story, telling our story in a way that will encourage others, in a way that will bring hope to others, in the way that will help others to see a future possible beyond their painful experiences. Stories connects us. Stories allows us to share our view of the world. It teaches us about ourselves. I learned a lot about myself as I was writing my story. I mean, recently I picked up the book again, Grace and the Storms, and I started to read, and I just wanted to have another read at it. Um, it's different when you read the book, when you're writing it and you're trying to make sure that you dot all the T's, you dot all the I's and cross all the T's and all of that. But I actually was reading from out of the experience, that and not as the author just wanted to read. And I myself, I was I was shocked by a few things in the book, and I'm like, goodness gracious, we went through all of this, I was, I was going through some of the things, reading some of the things that I wrote in especially in the earlier parts that had receded in my memory, and just reading that again. I think there was a particular one that really, really struck me as I was reading it again. It was the experience that I heard when I was in the ICU in UCH in I think it was uh, 1998 in ICU in UCH, and it was an experience. I was there in the ICU, and in a matron walked into the ICU and stood by the door and shouted my name, Irene Titilolo Lumese, bed 6. And everybody in the ward were just shocked that what was that about. All the nurses that in the ward literally dropped what they were doing and was wondering why did she shout out my name. And she made a U-turn and walked out of the ward. And so one of them ran after her. And she came back really looking perplexed. I mean, I was in the ICU. I was in an extremely bad situation then. And I was wondering, what was that? I mean, that was the question on all of us, on our mind. What was all that about? That night, I had an experience that was intense. I felt like I was a rope, when you do tug of war. I felt like I was the rope in between, being pulled by two very powerful, forces. And I remembered, I mean, in that story, I mean, I still was reading it and I was writing that was that night when I 100% was sure I heard angels singing. It was in the middle of the night. And at first I thought that, okay, maybe it was the choir that was practicing because the church was not too far from that place. But later on, I found that there was no way, even if the choir was practicing in the church, that their voices could have filtered into ICU. It was impossible. And so that convicted me that the voices that I was hearing singing they were definitely not the voice of human beings, but it was that song, the singing, that held me through that night in the struggle that I was going through. And when I came out of that experience, Psalm 126 became real to me. If it were not for the Lord on our side, and I was sharing with people, let Irene say, if it was not for the Lord on our side, then the enemy would have swallowed us up quick when they rose up against us in their fierce anger. It was such a vivid picture, but one that I had literally forgotten until I was reading my story again. And it gave me, it was such an encouragement to me in that moment when I was reading it, because it just showed me how God has preemptively cared for me right from the onset of these challenges that I had to deal with chronic respiratory diseases, chronic debilitating neuromuscular diseases. All those early years, I could see how God kept me day by day through those challenges. And today, sharing that story and the impact of it, the emotional healing that is brought, capturing that memory and creating, it was sharing that memory of how God helped me, of course, continued to inspire me to hold on and to trust God, that God has a hand in my story. And I know how many people have read that story, heard that story, that it has helped them also to know that God does not leave us alone. He will never abandon us. So there are many ways in which we can share our stories. And as we go on this month, I'm going to expand on it. There are many methods for writing or sharing or telling. but we testify when we share testimonies also. We are telling the stories of how we have overcome. I think the encouragement that I want to give us, that I want all of us to take away tonight, is that our stories are unique and we should not hoard them. And I will say upfront that yes, we need to find safe places where we can share our story. But one thing that I want you to know is that sharing your story is so essential for your emotional healing. I mean, sharing my story helped my healing process without any doubt. It kept me while I was going through, and it helped my healing process, my emotional healing. Journaling, I recommend journaling as a trauma transformational coach for my client. I recommend it strongly. It is so therapeutic when you can get to that space that you can tell the story of what happened to you. It brings you to the place where you acknowledge what happened to you and what you learned from it. And I'm going to expand on this, right? As I go on. For those of us who are Christians, we know that the Bible is filled with people, and each of them with their own unique stories. The Bible tells of the stories of individuals, families, friends, nations. I mean, it, daughters, fathers, mothers in different settings. And also, the Bible tells us the grand story. I mean, it's one grand story. Everything, all the stories we see in the Bible adds up to one grand story. It is the story of God, one and only God who created us humanity, our rebellions against Him, and His um, restoration of us back to Himself. And in each of our unique stories, each of the unique stories we see in the Bible tells of God's restoration. It tells of what God has the power to do with a story. When we look at the stories that are written in the Bible, and our own stories can do the same. We are inspired by the stories of people we study in the Bible. We today can also be the living epistles that others can study, read, and be inspired that can strengthen their faith in God, strengthen their trust in God. The people all around the world today can look into the Psalms for encouragement. When we go through life challenges, we go to the book of Psalms, we hear the vulnerability of David, the honesty with which David tells about his emotions when he was feeling overwhelmed by the pressures of life, by the troubles he was facing. He was so open, honest, authentic, vulnerable. In writing Grace in the Storms, I learned a lot of lessons from David. The way he opened up himself, the way it just bare it all before God. And it became inspirational for me. It became motivational for me that I can be this vulnerable with God. I can be this honest with how I'm processing my pain, my emotions. I mean, if you read Psalm 50, Psalm 51, you see that he didn't mince words about his pain. There was one thing he said, that was quite memorable, because when I was writing my story, I had to go back and read that story. It was talking about how his heart melted within him in the multitude of what he was going through. And I use that phrase in my book because the metaphors are so rich. And so for so countless reasons, up till this today, the story, the book of Psalms, the songs that the stories that David shared there is inspiring us. It will inspire the language you use in writing your story as well, especially when you find how you can relate, with them. The book of Proverbs is so full of nuggets and wisdom for knowledge that is there to, teach us what we should focus attention on. And the way the stories are used to pass across this message is also instructive for us when we want to share our own story. It encourages us that there are, life's experiences that we can relate to. And just as we could relate to other people's life experiences, there will be others who can relate to our own life experience. My nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of knowledge from our own personal story that will help them in their own journey. Friends, it's never going to be easy telling our stories. The beginning is tough, and that's why we need safe places. Sometimes we will need hand holding to be able to write out our stories. When I was writing out Grace in the Storms, I would, like I mentioned earlier, I started with just journaling and, just writing what I was going through at each season of my life and how I was experiencing God's help, God's grace, God's comfort. It was based on this, the scripture, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3 to 4, that, blessed be God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who comforts us in all our afflictions with the same comfort with which we will comfort others. So that early on in my experience with my journey, I knew that my story was not just about me, that I will receive comfort from God. And if I will allow myself to be comforted by God, to receive the comfort that God has available for me in the midst of the storms of life that I was enduring, the midst of the challenges I was facing, that comfort will be available for other people. And so from thence on, it became important to me that even in the midst of my pain, in the intensity of the pain, that I find God's comfort. What is God saying to me? How is His word comforting me? What are the promises that I can hold on to as I was going through each of the different phases of my life's experiences, my life's journey in the storm? And I began to share it with a few friends, by WhatsApp. Sorry, then we didn't have WhatsApp, by email. Just I wasn't blogging because then I didn't even know what blogging was. I was just sharing with a few friends, and I was still in the midst of the storms. I was still going through. I didn't see the end in sight. So I was just telling about the victory that was, landmark victories that I was meeting every day. It was everyday victory, overcoming this pain, coming out of this storm, just sharing it. And a friend of mine, our family friends in Ghana, said something to me and said, Irene, you have a profound story. You need to write this story. Yeah. And I wrote it in the book. I mean, I acknowledged them. And that was in 2001 when they first said to me, you need to write a story. And by then, I was in year 8 of my ordeal with my health in 2001. And then I came to Switzerland in 2003. And of course, still continue to write and share the victories that God was giving me along the way while I was still in the midst of the storms. And another dear sister who listened to how far I had come by 2004 said to me, Irene, you have a story to tell. You need to write your story. And with it said, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let the word be established. When these three different individuals said the same thing about writing the story, I now became more intentional about writing the story and actually gathering all the pieces that I had put, in different books and different forms, to put them into an electronic form because I was handwriting most of the time. And so that was the story of how I began to write Grace in the Storms. It took 13 years to write this book. 13 years. And why did it take that long? Because despite all the victories that I was experiencing along the way, I knew I had not reached the conclusion. There was still something, there was a resolution. I needed to be able to conclude the book in a way that will, would, would show a resolution, right? And honestly, at that point, 2005, there was no resolution in sight. And fast forward to 2013, when I now heard the lung transplant, then the complications, then the amputation of both legs, and how God gave me instructions of what He was going to do with my story, with the story He scripted of my life. I knew, yes, this is the time has come to finish writing Grace in the Storms. And it is called Grace in the Storms, a living proof. It's a living proof of God's grace that sustains us through the storms of life. That is the beginning. This is today is a teaser to what we're going to be sharing over the next few weeks of August. Why your story is powerful, why you must share it, and then we would use that and juxtapose it with lessons from Grace in the Storms. My prayer, my earnest desire is that what you will hear will inspire you to take a look at your own story and ask yourself, am I ready? And what do I need to be able to share my own story? Who can my story touch? Who can my story become a part of their a part of their own survival tool? And and ultimately, if your story does not translate to something that can benefit others, I dare to say that you will be wasting your pain. I know you've gone through something that's touched you, something that shook you. You've gone through experiences um, that might have um, traumatized you, wounded you in the inner places. Yes, I get it. And I also know that in going through it, you are still standing. And that means that you have learned something or you're learning something. That means that God's grace is sustaining you. That means that there are lessons from your story that can be a blessing to somebody else. And I am a strong believer that the story, the pain that we do not transform to purpose, to power, to profit, we waste it. We need to let our story become a conduit of God's comfort to other people. Writing my book, Grace in the Storm, showed me that there was purpose for my pain. It revealed to me that my pain was not in vain. It was just not a happenstance. Because by the time all the pieces were coming together, we could see the hand of God moving in my story. And year as year went in, year went out, I became more and more convicted that there was purpose in my pain. And the way I transact in the storm and how I allow the word of God to be real to me would become an opportunity for somebody else to be encouraged, to be strengthened in their own faith in God. Because ultimately, it's all about kingdom agenda. It's all about what God wants to do, where the stories He has scripted of our lives. Yes, sometimes it takes us through the fire. Yes, it takes us through the fear storms. But one thing that I know is that He never leaves us alone when we go through all these challenges. And our pain comes from different places. But the truth is, God does not waste our pain. He does not waste our tears. The Bible tells me that there's stored up in the book a record in His presence. And if God will not waste my pain or your pain, I think that we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we do. Your story is powerful, my dear friend, and your story matters. My name is Irene Titilola Ulumese. I'm a trauma transformational coach. I help people to transform their pain to power, to purpose, and to profit. I help you to walk through the journey of healing that can translate your story into one that will have eternal significance and impact. Your story is powerful. It needs to be told. And if you need help to walk this journey, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am just a DM away, an email away. And we'll continue to talk about grace in the storms as we go on this month. We'll be sharing more about the lessons from Grace in the Storms, why your story is powerful, and why you must tell your own story too. Now, if you have read Grace in the Storms, I want you to do me a favor. Share with me the lessons you gleaned from Grace in the Storms. Also, share with me questions that you may have. I'm going to address this as we continue through the course of this month, every Tuesday on Beyond the Pain Live, discussing lessons from Grace in the Storm and why your story is powerful, why you need to tell your story. Next week, I'm going to talk about storytelling and emotional healing. Why your story, telling your story is a critical part of your emotional healing. So don't forget to join me next Tuesday for Beyond the Pain Live at 9 p.m. Central European Time and 8 p.m. West African Time. And we'll here on Instagram Live, on my YouTube channel, on Beyond the Pain group, and on my Facebook page. Share with your friends, invite them to join us. Your story matters. Again, if you have read Grace in the Storms, please do me a favor, share what you read, a lesson, that something that meaningful for you in Grace in the Storm, something that was meaningful for you, one lesson that you learned from it, or one question that you have from it. Please, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been a joy spending this hour with you. Good night, and God bless you real good. May the month of August be a month of abundance of God's blessing for you and your household. God bless you real good. Good night, and bye for now.